meeting to order. Today we will consider three bills. S. 1163, the Native American Languages Reauthorization Act of 2015. S. 2580, the Reforming American Indian Standards of Education Act of 2016, the RAISE Act. And S. 2739, the Spokane Tribe of Indians of the Spokane Reservation Equitable Compensation Act. S. 1163, the Native American Languages Reauthorization Act, was introduced by Senators Udall and Senator Franken and Heinrich and Heitkamp, Murkowski, Schatz, and Tester. A legislative hearing was held in November of 2015. This would amend the Native American Programs Act of 1974, reauthorize certain Native American language programs through fiscal year 2020. The bill also modifies requirements for survival schools, language nests and grants, and the previous authorization expired in 2012. The Native American Languages Act is administered by the Administration of Native Americans within the Department of Health and Human Services. I know that the committee has reached out to the Department of Health and Human Services for delivery of two mandated congressional reports that have yet to arrive, and I'm hopeful that we can have those reports before this bill heads to the Senate floor. I'd like to turn to the senators in a few moments who've been involved in sponsoring that bill. Additionally, we have S. 2739, the Spokane Tribe of Indians and Spokane Reservation Equitable Compensation Act. It was introduced by Senator Cantwell along with Senator Murray, and legislative hearings were held for a similar bill introduced in the 113th Congress, S. 1448. This bill, S. 2739, would provide compensation to the tribe for the past and continuing use of tribal lands by the federal government for the generation of hydropower at the Grand Coulee Dam in Washington. There's a $53 million pay-for of this bill, and I know that Senator Cantwell is going to work hard on finding those offsets. In a few moments, I'll turn to Senator Cantwell for discussion of her bill. Finally, we will consider S. 2580, the RAISE Act, a bill that I introduced in February. The committee held a legislative hearing in April. This bill would cut through the bureaucratic red tape of the Bureau of Indian Education. The bill would separate all education-related functions from the Bureau of Indian Affairs and create an independent Indian education agency within the Department of the Interior. This Bureau of Indian Education school system includes 183 elementary and secondary schools and dormitories on 63 reservations in 23 states with an estimated 47,000 students. At an oversight hearing on the organizational challenges facing the Bureau of Indian Education, the Government Accountability Office testified and said the bureaucracy of the Bureau of Indian Affairs has created administrative and staffing problems for these schools. For instance, some of the most important functions like school construction, facility management, and budget planning don't directly fall under the authority of the director of the Bureau of Indian Education. Instead, the Bureau of Indian Affairs manages these functions. Just last month, the Government Accountability Office issued another eye-opening statement and a report on the safety and health of Indian school facilities. One disturbing statistic that the GAO uncovered is that 54 schools have not received a safety or health inspection during the past 4 fiscal years. It's also appalling that the current Bureau of Indian Education has gone through 34 directors since 1979. It's practically a new director every year. You wonder how an organization can survive if the leader of the organization cannot be held accountable to the students or to the taxpayers. That's why I've introduced the RAISE Act. The new Indian Education Agency would be headed by a presidentially appointed and Senate-confirmed director. It would also create 2 new assistant directors that would oversee school operations and academic programs. This would streamline and provide a more suitable structure than what currently exists. I intend to offer a substitute amendment. This amendment incorporates suggestions from the Department of Interior and the Indian country educators. The substitute amendment also mandates that the President include a separate request for funds for construction of school facilities each fiscal year. I will note that the committee has received a letter of support from the National Indian Education Association endorsing this substitute amendment, and I intend to make this letter of support part of the record. I do want to thank the Department of Interior for working with my staff on this important bill. Before we turn to the specific bills, I'd like to ask the Vice Chairman, Senator Tester, if he has an opening statement.
I do, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this business meeting today to consider 3 bills before this committee. After today, this committee will report out over 10 bills in the last month alone, so I want to commend you for your efforts in moving Indian country forward. I co-sponsored one of those bills today, the Native American Language Reauthorization Act, which we'll be voting on. I Co-sponsored that was Senator Udall and others, as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman. I will let him discuss the substance of that bill. But I would like to restate my strong support for native language revitalization and maintenance. We know that revitalizing native language goes hands in hand with revitalizing native communities. This country went to great lengths to abolish the use of native languages not so long ago. I believe that we must do all we can to reverse those impacts of bad policies, which has caused a number of generations of Native Americans to lose out on learning their own language and heritage. I am thankful those policies weren't entirely successful, and we've been able to see a resurgence in tribal languages in recent years, but we do have a long way to go. And that is why I support the reauthorization of the Esther Martinez Act. It provides much-needed federal resources to tribes so that whole communities can take part in the language revitalization process, which I think is important. With respect to S-2580, the RAISE Act, I appreciate the chairman's efforts to reform the Bureau of Indian Education and Indian education in general. We sat through many hearings with witnesses telling how the BIA is failing Indian children. I agree that BIA has its problem, and we need to work on those. I would just say that the RAISE Act is a step in the right direction. I firmly believe that. But the fact is there are some things in the bill that don't work very well, and I would just say the cap is one of them, Mr. Chairman. I believe this is an important message to send to the BIE to make them come to the table so that they understand that either they fix their problems or we'll fix them for them. So I just want to say thank you. I look forward to working with you on this bill to address the issues that are shortcomings because, quite frankly, we're not meeting the needs of kids in Indian country when it comes to education. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Udall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I applaud the chairman for, my statement right now is just on the Indian education part. I'll wait on Esther Martinez when that comes up. I applaud the chairman for working with the administration and other stakeholders to reform the Bureau of Indian Education and ensure that Indian education remains a top priority in future years. We still have a lot of work to do to improve BIE, and it will take the support of members on both sides of the aisle to get it done. However, as ranking member on Interior Appropriations, I have particular concerns about the funding levels permanently authorized, and I would underline permanently here, permanently authorized by this amendment. The amendment authorizes $983 million a year for Indian education programs, including $130 million for school construction. That level is actually $8 million less than what Congress provided this year and $67 million below what the President requested for 2017. I appreciate that we are operating under tight budget caps. However, I'm concerned that the bill doesn't provide enough funding for Indian education programs. Going forward, we are going to need more funding to build new schools and improve the condition of existing schools. I'm also concerned that this bill will make it hard to increase base operating funds for tribal schools or boost funding for native language programs, tribal colleges, and many other important programs. Finally, the bill doesn't provide any funding to stand up the new BIE organization, even though creating a standalone bureau will require additional resources. I appreciate the chairman putting this legislation forward, but I believe that changes are needed before this bill becomes law. I also agree it will be important to hear directly from tribes about their thoughts on this bill as it moves through the process. I stand ready to work with the chairman and vice chairman as the legislation moves forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cantwell, you have a bill. Anything you'd like to say with regard to
Thank you,
it?
Mr. Chairman. I will submit a longer statement for the record, but I just want to thank you for putting S-2739 on the docket today. This is a legislation that's passed both the House and the Senate, just never at the same time. So hopefully this Congress, we would be able to do that. Thank you.
Senator Heitkamp.
Mr. Chairman, having recently returned from two of my reservations in North Dakota, I can tell you the last thing we need to do is set caps on Indian education. And where I sincerely appreciate the efforts and the attempts to hold agencies accountable, I will tell you I am concerned that this setting caps sends the wrong message. And in many ways, we all know that there are huge bureaucratic problems with a lot of administration of Indian programs, but frequently the punishment is to lower the opportunity for children. And so where it's important that we take care of the fraud, waste, and abuse, it also is critically important that we recognize the extreme needs in Indian country. And so for that reason, I want to just put that on the record. I applaud you for putting this on the markup, but express just some very, very serious concerns about the funding levels for Indian education that are established in this bill.
Anyone else like to make a statement? All right, if not, we'll now take up S. 1163, the Native American Languages Reauthorization Act, and S. 2739, the Spokane Tribe of Indians of the Spokane Reservation Equitable Compensation Act. No amendments have been filed on these bills. I now move to consider these two bills, S. 1163 and S. 2739. Is there a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Both bills pass. Now we'll turn to page to S. 2580, the RAISE Act. One amendment has been filed, and I would just raise to thank all of you for the kind comments about the direction that we're heading with this piece of legislation. I understand the concerns about the cap. I understand that the concerns in terms of the specific amounts of money. I think this is why the substitute amendment mandates that the director prepare each fiscal year a unified budget that includes funds for all agency-funded schools, including the construction, the operation, and the maintenance of the school facilities. And the substitute amendment also holds the president responsible for providing a separate budget request for the construction of the schools by the agency. The budget request will then be submitted to Congress and to appropriators to make those decisions. The substitute amendment authorizes a fixed number of dollars, $983 million for each fiscal year, as was stated. This is $102 million more than the average amount of $881 million given each fiscal year from 2013, 14, 15, and 16. So this, I believe, is going to provide greater accountability, transparency, and resources to the education agency. So with that, I would move to consider substitute amendment RYA 16392. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. No. Anybody on this? Second? Yes, I have a second.
Second.
All right. Any additional discussion beyond what we've already had? Yeah, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
In the opinion of the chair, the amendment passes. Now move to consider S. 2580 as amended. Is there a second for that? Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. In the opinion of the chair, this amendment, the amendment and the bill passes. I want to thank the members for getting the business of our committee completed expeditiously. Ask unanimous consent that the staff be allowed to make technical and conforming changes. Being no objections, we'll conclude the business meeting and move on to the hearing.